Hello everyone! Today's video is a follow-up of sorts. Not long ago, I talked about the 1995 adaptation of Jane Austen's Persuasion, starring Amanda Root and Ciarán Hinds. I briefly mentioned this version in that video, but today I would like to expand on that and share my thoughts on the entire film. This Persuasion, directed by Adrian Shergold and adapted by Simon Burke, came out in 2007, and it aired in the US the following year as part of a Masterpiece Theatre Austen series. It stars Sally Hawkins as Anne Elliot and Rupert Penry Jones as Captain Frederick Wentworth, former lovers who were torn asunder 8 years ago when Anne was persuaded to refuse his offer of marriage. Now circumstances are reversed, and when they're thrown together, they suffer the agony of meeting for the first time since their bitter separation, each believing the other has moved on. When it comes to adaptations, people tend to prefer the one they saw first. Such is the case with me and Persuasion. My first introduction to the story was the 1995 film, which I saw many times before this even existed, so that's where my preference lies. However, I do enjoy this version as well. I appreciate all that's different about it, and I respect it as a decent adaptation. It's only 93 minutes long, which is pretty short for any Austen adaptation, but for the most part, it doesn't feel rushed. It's only in the last act that it feels like it's racing to wrap things up. We're sprinting toward the finish line, galloping to the conclusion. It has a relatively modern feel, although I hesitate to put it that way. It felt modern in 2008 when I was watching it on PBS, but compared to how modern I realize now it could have been, it seems tame. It's characterized by several rather conspicuous stylistic choices. There are some POV shots, a handheld cam is used a lot. Our first introduction to Anne is a jumpy, jerky sequence that follows her around Kellynch Hall. I have never been fond of jerky camera work or jumpy editing in period dramas. It's something they kept trying in the mid-2000s, I believe, in an attempt to freshen up the material and appeal to a contemporary audience. I'm that contemporary young audience that they were trying to appeal to, and it didn't do anything for me. Another thing that sticks out is some of the framing and certain close-ups that are way too close. I especially don't like the way Anne's conversation with Lady Russell in the pump room is filmed, with tight close-ups and unusual positioning. It's trying so hard to be artsy and interesting, but I just want a normal conversation. I don't know, am I a dinosaur because I don't like too much fancy editing and camera work in my costume drama? Maybe! The other major stylistic feature is that Anne frequently breaks the fourth wall, gazing into the camera lens as if she's baring her soul to the viewer. I always find this unnerving at first, but I have come to recognize how it emphasizes Anne's isolation. There's no one else to whom she can reveal her secret pain, so the viewer becomes her confidant, the silent witness to what she's really feeling. These fourth wall breaks may be surprising, even off-putting to some, but they make us feel actively involved in the scene and give us intimate access to the character, which is key in a plot that chiefly revolves around her emotions. At the risk of making this sound like a depressing film, which it isn't, I will say that this version is thick with heartache and regret and melancholy, often bordering on despair, with few light moments to ease the despondency. Sally Hawkins' performance is quite a contrast to Amanda Root's almost stoic endurance and silent agony. Hawkins' Anne weeps, she sobs, she voices her thoughts in tearful diary entries. Her face often registers her shock, dismay, or anguish, and the very thought of Wentworth makes it hard for her to breathe. I don't point this out as a criticism, mind you. Her interpretation is more emotional, but it also feels true to the character. Her feelings may come pouring out when she's alone, but she still endeavors to conceal her broken heart from the rest of the world. Rupert Penry-Jones likewise takes a different approach to his character. His Captain Wentworth tends to be quiet and still. He's more somber and reserved, even in the party scenes, which is a contrast with the gregarious, carefree front that Ciarán Hinds' Wentworth put forth. I guess in general I'd say that Penry-Jones's interpretation of the character is more brooding. He chooses his words carefully, often speaking with a bitter double meaning, which adds to Anne's discomfort, since she alone knows what he's referring to. It makes perfect sense, though, that he would be guarded in her presence and scrutinize her with piercing, stormy looks. These actors have very good timing with their surreptitious glances, by the way. There are several near misses where one almost gets caught sneaking a look at the other. It's the one giveaway. They barely speak to each other, they act like strangers, yet they're ever conscious of each other's presence. The rest of the cast is pretty good, including Anthony Head as Anne's father, vain, beauty-obsessed Sir Walter Elliot. He's a trifle hammy, but I think he's having fun with the role, and honestly, I'm not sure that anyone can play Sir Walter without being a little hammy. That's just how the character is. Equally over the top is Amanda Hale's portrayal of Anne's younger sister, Mary. She nails the pettiness, the whining, and the hissy fits, but she's kind of nuts. Hale makes some interesting choices, emphasizing a certain squirreliness and awkwardness and eccentricity that I'm not sure Austen had in mind, but it did make me think, wow, she really takes after her father. And Alice Krige plays family friend Lady Russell. I find the character less self-righteous and more of a pretender in this one. She tries at first to claim she wasn't the one responsible for Anne's breakup, as if Anne doesn't remember exactly what happened. I think the most telling moment for the character is the way she freaks out when she sees Wentworth show up at the concert. She acts like he's got the plague. I do feel certain characters and actors don't get to make as much of an impression in this version, probably because of the shorter runtime. Tobias Menzies' Mr. Elliot, for example. My biggest takeaway with him is that he looks very arrogant and very tall. And Mrs. Clay, for someone known for inserting herself into the family, we don't see much of her. I also find the Musgrove girls hard to tell apart. They eventually clarify that Henrietta is the brunette, but other than that, they seem interchangeable. They don't spend more than a couple minutes on the whole Henry Hayter thing either, so I would bet that an uninformed viewer would be pretty confused about what's going on there. One character who gets more screen time is Captain Harville, Wentworth's friend and eventual wingman. He gets a few additional scenes, one or two of which I don't think are in the book. The way he seeks clarification when Wentworth introduces Anne, you just know he's heard about her already.
Miss Anne Elliot?
Yes.
Captain.
Now, I don't mean for this to be a comparative review. I want the movie to stand on its own, but I can't help it. I'm gonna make some observations comparing this and the 95 version. Musically, they're kind of similar. They're kind of like aesthetic cousins. 95's score was all piano, and this one is all piano plus strings, but much more angsty. This one has scenes showing the other side of the story, revealing things to the viewer that Anne isn't privy to. The other film did that a little bit, but not as much as this one. Both movies have multiple scenes in which we get a good look at the Elliots eating. Are the Elliots notoriously nasty eaters? Is that something Austen emphasized in the book and I just don't remember it? I know it's been a few years since I read it, but that doesn't stick out to me. The 95 version was remarkable for its natural lighting, particularly the warm, candlelit glow in the evening scenes. This version is noticeably brighter and yet darker. I don't know, it's got more gray and blue in its palette, whereas the other had more warmth. Regarding wardrobe, I don't think we ever see Wentworth in his uniform, whereas in the other one, I think he was in his uniform half the time, certainly at the formal occasions. And Anne's wardrobe here, I don't love it. Amanda Root wore simple, high-necked gowns in white or pale colors. They weren't flashy, but they were pretty in a quiet, subdued way. Sally Hawkins' gowns aren't exactly distinctive. They're not rich and stylish like her sister Elizabeth's, but they're not dowdy or plain either. What I don't like is the heavy-duty cloak they keep putting her in, mainly because it looks like it was made from an old carpet bag. I just think it's hideous. And she wears an ugly shawl in a few scenes as well. And I just wonder, were these pieces purposely designed to be ugly? Are they making a statement here? Is it to make her look more unfortunate? Or is it just me? Did they put her in this and say, oh yeah, that looks great. You look a little bit stylish, but not too stylish. And it's just me who thinks that they're... Naturally, the two films have similar exteriors, unlike, say, Emma, which is set in a small, fictitious country community. Persuasion is rooted in real places, destinations that are significant to the story. So it's no surprise the two films have scenery and sets in common. Lyme is Lyme, and Bath is Bath. That said, Lyme in 1995 is sunny and refreshing, while Lyme in 2007 is bleak and stormy. I don't know if the filmmakers were just unlucky with the weather, or if they chose to film in less than stellar conditions. I do think it's interesting that at this point in 95, Anne was perking up. She'd had a positive interaction or two with Wentworth, and she was being rejuvenated by her surroundings. Whereas in 2007, that hasn't really happened. So I guess you could say the weather reflects how things are going for Anne. Another difference. Here, when they run into each other in Bath, we already know that he's still very much in love with her, thanks to his conversation with Harville, in which they get absolutely soaked. He doesn't just show up out of the blue. We already know that he has followed her with the intention of trying his luck with her again. And this is a charming interaction. They laugh together, which is great, and then the romantic tension dials up a bit when they do the eye flick thing. So that's a nice scene, until Mr. Elliot comes in. Ugh. And as we're in the home stretch here, I have a few more general observations to make. When I reviewed the 95 version, I pointed out all the Jane Eyre connections, so I guess I'll do that here too. Sally Hawkins played Mrs. Reed in the 2011 adaptation of Jane Eyre. Amanda Hale was Jane in the BBC's 2016 radio adaptation, and Rupert Penry-Jones played St. John Rivers in the 1997 adaptation. That's all that I caught. I did look up a few of the other actors that I wasn't 100% sure about, and I didn't find anything, but if there are other Jane Eyre intersections I missed, let me know in the comments. The log crossing scene. There have been times watching this when I was so distracted by the weird way it was filmed with the whole POV thing that I almost overlooked how mortifying the whole thing is. You just know she wants the earth to open and swallow her up. One of the moments in this story is the one where Wentworth reveals he is not as indifferent as he seems, where he tells the Crofts to take Anne, who's been limping along, and drive her back to the house. I like this scene, I like how they do this scene, but it does come dangerously close to being unromantic. You can take it either way, really. It's thoughtful, it reveals he's aware of her, it shows he cares, it's got, physical contact. But also, it's kind of funny when she protests the way he just pulls her over, picks her up, and dumps her on the seat. It's like, whoomp. Very chivalrous. One part that seems noticeably fast-tracked is Louisa's incident. There's no build-up to it. It just happens in about as much time as it takes Wentworth to whip off his cravat right after. This turns into another moment for our hero and heroine, and I do appreciate that Austen chose to break the ice between them like this. They both step up in the crisis, Anne taking charge and Wentworth right there at her side to help. It's an unusual way to show it, but it demonstrates their mutual respect while forcing them into the close proximity they have been avoiding. Heck, we even get an overhead shot which I think shows they're holding their hands together under Louisa's busted head. It's not exactly sexy or romantic, but it's something. It's the first of a series of baby steps. Wentworth then speaks in favor of her staying as a nurse, he hands her into the carriage instead of avoiding contact, and he seeks her advice in how to break the news to the Musgroves. I really like that they have this communication. Even if they don't explicitly say much, at least they're talking, and this and the follow-up dialogue is something I miss in the other version. It's the Bath segment onward, the third act, where the pace noticeably picks up and we have to cram in new characters. Mr. Elliot, the Dalrymples, Mrs. Smith, we barely see anything of them. And am I the only person who watches this scene and thinks it is kind of rude of Anne to keep her family waiting and then come downstairs and announce she's going somewhere else? She should have told them before. The climax in particular feels like it has a lot going on, a mass of characters descending on Bath, showing up at Camden Place all at once and nearly scotching things for Anne. But it's a big indication that the character is taking back the reins of her own life when she interrupts the hubbub to pull Wentworth aside for a private conference in an enclosed room. That's a very bold step for her. But if you're familiar with the film, you know what the real climax is. It's the longest run in the world, Anne literally chasing after her man, running through the streets of Bath trying to find him. I've seen the edits where people make it seem like she's just running and running forever. They pair it up with Chariots of Fire or the Benny Hill theme, and I've made fun of it plenty of times myself. It is a long run, and it is kind of ridiculous. I'm not sure that it's that ridiculous. It kind of is, but it kind of isn't. First, she's interrupted by Mrs. Smith, who gives her an exposition dump that doesn't seem to make much of a difference at this point, since Anne's already made up her mind. It's kind of like an afterthought, like, oh wow, dodged a bullet there with Mr. Elliot. Anyway, cleared up that loose thread. Bye! Then she runs some more until she gets to Harville, who gives her the letter. And I am pretty disappointed with the letter in this one. I want to see Wentworth furiously scribbling while overhearing Anne and Harville debate constancy between the sexes. 1995 did such a good job with this. This version decided to go in a completely different direction, and some of that dialogue is even given to Captain Benwick in an earlier scene. Lame. By the way, when is Wentworth supposed to have written this letter? He just left her house. That's why she's running after him. She believes she can catch him, and it hasn't been that long. So, did he write the letter earlier and then leave it behind while he went to call on her and ask her the question from Admiral Croft? Or did he hurry away from her and rush back, write the letter, and then rush out again to return to her house, but leave the letter behind? I'm confused, and nothing I come up with makes much sense. You know what would have made more sense is if they had just done it the way it was in the book. As anticlimactic as I may find it, though, the letter is still powerful enough to inspire Anne to attempt an unladylike sprint, and this time she meets with the Crofts and a dead end. Ah! Then she has to run all the way back to Camden Place until finally she smacks into him. I like the dialogue here and her smiling assurance that this time her yes really means yes and nothing's going to change that. And then the longest run is followed by the longest stretch for a kiss. Oh my goodness, just kiss already! The running thing does tend to make me roll my eyes, but I do get a kick out of it and the collision at the end, which he just hurtles into him, basically body slams Wentworth. And it's kind of crazy, but it's fun, it's different, it's memorable. I'm not sure how realistic it is. For one thing, I feel like someone would have stopped her and been like, "Lady, what's wrong? Are you okay? Why are you running?" And, when she gets there, when she crashes into him, she is out of breath, and it does take her a moment to regain her composure, but it's not nearly as much as I feel like she really would have needed. A lady unused to such exercise, running like that all over town, and then coming to an abrupt stop. Yeah, she would be hyperventilating, she'd be doubled over, gasping, drenched in sweat, possibly drooling. I don't know. I have this crazy idea, and I'm just gonna go ahead and do it. I want to test this and see how long does it take me to get these lines out. This might be the stupidest thing I have done all day, and I might end up just cutting it out, but here goes nothing. I'll be back in a few minutes. Oh my goodness. Oh, my legs feel like spaghetti. Oh, Captain Wentworth. Oh, Captain Wentworth. I thank you for your proposal, and I accept it most willingly. Oh my goodness. Ow, my throat. I'm seeing stars. That was a terrible idea. Why did I do that? I'm not sweating. I don't think I ran nearly as much as she did. Up and down 2 flights of stairs. Ran around the house 3 times. Yeah, this is an awful idea. What was I thinking? They tie things up with a cute epilogue, and while it's abrupt, and there's a little too much spinning for me, and the silent waltzing is kinda random, it's charming, and I'll take it. At least there's no circus passing by. I'm not planning to do more Persuasion reviews, but there are a couple more versions out there. There's a 1971 miniseries I've seen some of, and it's fine. That's on YouTube. There's a Spanish one from 1972, which you can also find on YouTube with English subtitles. And there's also that 2022 one, which still exists. The 95 adaptation remains number 1 for me, but while there are certain choices I don't love in the 2007 version, I do think it's both competent and enjoyable. I've seen it several times before, and I'm sure I'll happily revisit it several times in the future. Ultimately, though, nothing is as good as the book. Those are my thoughts on this adaptation of Persuasion. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you have seen this film, I'd love to hear what you think of it, so go ahead and share your thoughts in the comments below, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.